The 30th of November, 1939, the Finnish-Soviet border. The Red Army crosses into Finland without a declaration of war, and Soviet bombers swiftly appear over Helsinki, killing civilians and shattering windows across the capital. Stalin's commanders have told their men they will be welcomed as liberators, that the war will be finished soon, and that the Finnish working class is waiting to greet them with flowers. Instead, they find a Finnish army that knows every meter of the terrain and has prepared for exactly this moment. The invaders suffer catastrophic losses, as entire divisions are encircled in the forests and destroyed. Out of this unequal and brutal conflict emerge soldiers whose names will define Finnish military culture for generations. One of them is a young man who will be fighting against communism all his life, serving under the flags of Finland, Nazi Germany, and the United States of America. His name is Lauri Törni. Lauri Alan Törni was born on the 28th of May, 1919 in the town of Viipuri, then part of independent Finland, today the Russian city of Viborg. His father, Jalmari Törni, was a ship captain, and his mother, Rosa Maria, born Kosonen, ran the household. He had two younger sisters, Salme and Kaja. The family was settled and respectable, and Törni grew up in an environment that prized physical accomplishment. He attended business school and excelled in sport, particularly skiing and boxing. As a young man, he was a childhood friend of Sten Suvio, who would go on to win the boxing gold medal at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Törni served with the anti-communist and paramilitary Civil Guard, and in 1938 entered military service, joining Jäger Battalion 4, stationed in the village of Kiviniemi on the Karelian Isthmus. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. 3 months later, when the Soviet Union attacked Finland and the Winter War began on the 30th of November 1939, Törni's enlistment was extended and his unit was moved to the front. He was a junior sergeant responsible for supply logistics, a post that satisfied neither his energy nor his ambitions. One night, as temperatures fell to -42 degrees Celsius or -44 degrees Fahrenheit, he slipped out of his camp undetected by his own sentries, walked alone to a Soviet outpost, seized a prisoner, and marched him back to the Finnish lines. Recognizing his potential, his commanders assigned him to light infantry missions, and his unit took part in the fighting around Lake Ladoga, including the encirclement and destruction of Soviet divisions at Lemeti, an engagement that demonstrated the capacity of Finnish forces to annihilate opponents far larger than themselves. By the end of the Winter War, which concluded with a Moscow peace treaty in March 1940 and Finland's cession of territory including the Karelian Isthmus, Törni had been sent to officer training and commissioned as a second lieutenant in the reserves. The peace lasted a little over a year. In June 1941, following Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, Finland entered the war again in what became known in Finland as the Continuation War, or the Second Soviet-Finnish War, fighting alongside Nazi Germany with the stated aim of recovering the territories lost in 1940. Before the new conflict began, Törni had gone to Vienna in Austria for 7 weeks of training with the Waffen-SS, the military branch of the Nazi paramilitary organization. He returned to Finland in July 1941, holding the rank of SS Untersturmführer, an equivalent to a second lieutenant in the US Army, in addition to his Finnish commission. This training was part of a broader arrangement by which around 1,400 Finnish volunteers had joined the Waffen-SS. Field Marshal Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim, the commander of Finnish forces, subsequently requested their return for service in the Finnish army. In the Continuation War, Törni's reputation grew far beyond what he had achieved during the Winter War. He returned to active duty in the Finnish armed forces and was seriously wounded in 1942 when he skied over a landmine and triggered it. However, this did not stop him, and in 1943 the Finnish High Command created a dedicated unit under his command, an infantry detachment that unofficially took his name and operated deep behind Soviet lines. Detachment Törni was a light infantry force trained for reconnaissance, sabotage, and combat in the forest terrain of Karelia, a border region between Finland and the Soviet Union. It became feared by Soviet commanders and celebrated in Finnish military culture. One of the men who served under Törni's command during this period was a young reconnaissance soldier named Mauno Koivisto, who would later serve as President of Finland from 1982 to 1994. The detachment's effectiveness was such that the Soviet army placed a bounty of 3 million Finnish marks on Törni's head. The final engagement in which Detachment Törni fought was the Battle of Ilomantsi in July and August 1944, the last significant Finnish-Soviet battle of the Continuation War, fought in the forests of North Karelia. Finnish forces, operating in difficult terrain against a much larger Soviet army, succeeded in encircling and repelling 2 Soviet divisions. Earlier, on the 9th of July, 1944, Törni had been awarded the Mannerheim Cross, 2nd class, Finland's highest military decoration. Of the approximately 600,000 Finns who served in the Continuation War, only 191 received this distinction. The September 1944 Moscow Armistice ended the Continuation War. Its terms required Finland to expel German troops from Finnish territory, beginning the Lapland War, a conflict between former allies that lasted into 1945. This time, Finns were fighting against Nazi Germany. The armistice also required Finland to demobilize most of its military. Törni was discharged in November 1944. Suddenly unemployed and unwilling to accept an outcome that left the Soviets in possession of his family's homeland. In January 1945, he was recruited by a pro-German Finnish resistance network and left for Germany to train for potential sabotage operations in the event of a Soviet occupation of Finland. When that training was cut short in March 1945, and with no means of returning to Finland, Törni joined a Waffen-SS unit fighting Soviet forces near the city of Schwerin in northern Germany. He surrendered to British troops in the closing days of the war, and in June 1945 escaped from a British prisoner of war camp in Lübeck in northern Germany, making his way back to Finland. What awaited him at home was not the welcome he had earned. Finland, operating under the constraints of the Moscow Armistice and Soviet pressure, had no room to protect men who had continued to fight in German service after the armistice. When Törni arrived in Helsinki, the capital of Finland, he was arrested by the Finnish state police, Valpo. He escaped, was recaptured in April 1946, and tried for treason for continuing to serve in the German military during the Lapland War. In January 1947, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. He served part of this sentence at the provincial prison in Turku, a city in southwestern Finland, and escaped again in June 1947. Once again, he was recaptured and was transferred to the Riihimäki state prison in southern Finland. He was there till December 1948, when President Juho Paasikivi pardoned him. Released and unable to find a stable future in Finland, Törni left in 1949 with his wartime executive officer, Holger Pitkänen. They crossed the border from the Finnish town of Tornio into the Swedish town of Haparanda and traveled to Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, where Törni stayed with a Swedish aristocratic family that had sheltered a number of Finnish officers after the war. In Stockholm, he met a Swedish-Finnish woman named Maria Kops and became engaged to her. To find work, he signed on as a seaman using a false name aboard the merchant ship SS Bolivia, bound for Caracas in Venezuela. From Caracas, he made his way onto a Swedish cargo ship, the MS Skagen, heading for the United States. In the Gulf of Mexico, he jumped overboard and swam to shore. He arrived in the United States as an illegal immigrant and a man without a country. Törni traveled to New York City, where he was helped by the Finnish-American community. In 1954, he enlisted in the U.S. Army under the name Larry Thorne. He was drawn immediately toward the U.S. Army Special Forces, and between 1958 and 1962, he served with the 10th Special Forces Group in the town of Bad Tölz in West Germany. During this period, he was second in command of a search and recovery operation in the Zagros Mountains of Iran, a mission in difficult high-altitude terrain that added further to his reputation among Special Forces officers as a man who solved problems no one else could. In November 1963, Törni deployed to South Vietnam, operating near the Cambodian border. His unit ran civilian irregular defense group encampments, training and leading local fighters against communist Viet Cong forces. During this time, he was wounded and received 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for valor. He had been fighting communists by this point for a quarter of a century under 3 flags of very different states. On the 18th of October, 1965, Törni boarded a South Vietnamese Air Force CH-34 helicopter as part of Operation Shining Brass, the first clandestine mission tasked with locating Viet Cong resupply points along the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos and directing airstrikes against them. 2 helicopters launched from the camp and rendezvoused with a U.S. Air Force Forward Air Controller aircraft in deteriorating weather over a mountainous area of Phuoc Son District in Quang Nam Province in central Vietnam. While one helicopter flew down through a break in the clouds to drop off the 6-man team, Törni's helicopter and the small observation plane stayed nearby. When the first helicopter came back above the clouds, both aircraft had disappeared. Search teams found nothing, and the crash site could not be located. Shortly after his disappearance in a helicopter crash, Törni was posthumously promoted to Major and awarded the Legion of Merit and the Distinguished Flying Cross. He remained listed as missing in action for 34 years. In 1999, a joint Finnish and American team recovered the remains of those aboard the crashed helicopter. In 2003, after formal identification confirmed by dental records, Lauri Törni, or Larry Thorne, was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. He remains the only former member of the Waffen-SS buried at Arlington. When his helicopter crashed in South Vietnam, he was 46 years old.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.